And if you think the story of the 2000 Sacagawea dollar coin ends with its release, Satatsitintin fordernd tiad its design or even its rare variations, then this is where things become even more interesting. Because what truly gives a coin its long-term life isn't just how it was created, but how people continue to interact with it over time. And in the years following its introduction, something unusual started to happen. Something that the United States Mint likely didn't fully predict. And that is the gradual shift of this coin from everyday circulation into a quiet, collectible space, where it wasn't loudly advertised as rare or valuable, but instead slowly built its reputation among collectors who appreciated its uniqueness. Because unlike many coins that rely purely on age or scarcity, the Sacagawea dollar carried a combination of factors that made it stand out in a more subtle way. Its golden appearance, its historical significance, and its unexpected variations all worked together to create a kind of layered interest. And over time, collectors began to pay closer attention not just to whether they had the coin, but to what kind of version they had. Because in the world of coin collecting, two coins that look identical to an untrained eye can be completely different in terms of desirability. And that idea alone is what keeps the hunt alive, because it transforms collecting from a simple activity into a form of exploration, where every detail matters, every line, every edge, every tiny difference becomes a clue. And this is exactly what happened with the 2000 Sacagawea dollar, where certain high-grade examples began to stand out. Coins that had been preserved in near-perfect condition, untouched by circulation, maintaining their original luster and sharpness. And these coins started to attract attention in auctions and collector communities, not because they were common, but because finding them in that level of condition was not as easy as it seemed. And this is something many beginners overlook, because they assume that if a coin was produced in large numbers, then it must be easy to find in perfect condition. But the reality is very different, because once a coin enters circulation, it immediately begins to wear down, to lose its original detail, and over time, those small imperfections add up, which means that truly pristine examples become less common than expected. And this is where grading comes into play, where professional grading services evaluate coins based on their condition, assigning them a grade that reflects their quality. And while grading might seem like a technical aspect of collecting, it actually plays a huge role in determining how a coin is perceived in the market. Because a small difference in grade can significantly change how desirable a coin is to collectors. And for the 2000 Sacagawea dollar, this has created a niche demand for top-grade specimens, coins that represent the best possible version of that year. And even though these coins are not necessarily rare in the traditional sense, their condition makes them stand out in a crowded field. And this is where the psychology of collecting becomes even more fascinating. Because collectors are not just looking for rarity. They are looking for excellence, for perfection, for something that feels complete. And that pursuit often drives them to search through countless coins, examining each one carefully, hoping to find that one example that stands above the rest. And this process, this ongoing search, is what keeps the coin relevant even decades after its release. Because as long as there are collectors who care about these details, the coin continues to have a place in the market. And beyond the technical aspects, there's also the emotional side of collecting, which is often overlooked but incredibly important. Because for many people, coins like the Sacagawea dollar are not just items to be bought and sold. They are pieces of personal history, reminders of a specific time, a specific moment, or even a specific experience, like finding one unexpectedly or receiving one as part of a collection. And these personal connections add another layer of value that can't be measured in numbers. And this is something that becomes more apparent the longer you stay in the world of coin collecting, because you begin to realize that value is not just about price. It's about meaning, about significance, about the story that each coin carries with it. And in the case of the 2000 Sacagawea dollar, that story continues to evolve, because even today, new collectors are discovering it for the first time, learning about its history, its design, its variations, and its place in modern coinage. And each new person who becomes interested in the coin adds to its ongoing legacy, because they bring their own perspective, their own curiosity, and their own appreciation. And this constant renewal of interest is what keeps the coin alive, what prevents it from fading into obscurity. Because as long as there are people willing to look closer, to ask questions, to explore the details, the story continues. And that's what makes this coin so unique. Because it's not just a piece of the past, it's part of an ongoing journey, one that you can become a part of simply by paying attention, by taking a moment to look at something that others might ignore. And that's really what coin collecting is about at its core. It's about seeing what others don't, about finding value where others see none, and about appreciating the small details that make something truly special. And the 2000 Sacagawea dollar is a perfect example of that, because it reminds us that even the most ordinary objects can hold extraordinary stories, if we're willing to look closely enough. And just when you think you've understood everything about this coin, there's always another layer waiting to be discovered. Because one of the most overlooked aspects of the 2000 Sacagawea dollar is how it quietly influenced the future of U.S. coin design and public engagement, something that isn't immediately obvious unless you step back and look at the bigger picture. Because before this coin, many designs followed a more traditional path, focusing heavily on political figures and formal representations. But with Sacagawea, there was a noticeable shift toward storytelling, toward creating a connection that felt more personal and less institutional. And this shift didn't just affect one coin. It opened the door for future designs that explored different themes, different narratives, and different ways of representing history. And in that sense, the Sacagawea dollar wasn't just a standalone release. It was part of a broader evolution in how coins could be used to tell stories. And that's something that continues to influence modern coinage even today. And if you think about it, that makes this coin more important than it might seem at first glance. Because it represents a turning point, a moment when design and meaning came together in a way that changed expectations. And this is where the coin's legacy becomes even more interesting. Because it's not just about what it is, it's about what it led to and how it helped shape the future. And at the same time, there's also the reality of how the coin was received by the public. Because despite all the effort put into its design and promotion, it didn't fully replace paper currency as some had hoped. And that creates an interesting contrast, because on one hand, the coin is rich in meaning and design. But on the other hand, its everyday usage remained limited, and that gap between intention and reality adds another dimension to its story, because it shows that even well-designed ideas don't always behave the way we expect them to in the real world. And yet, even with that limitation, the coin found its place, not as a dominant form of currency, but as a collectible, as something that people could appreciate in a different way. And sometimes that's how value evolves, not through mass adoption, but through selective appreciation.